So let me just briefly introduce the three representatives we've got from both regional and local government more broadly. The first is, well, no, that's not quite right for you, Liz, is it? For Liz Halsted from Auckland Transport, who has got the role of Policy Plans and Sustainability Manager. Vicki Buck, Councillor from Christchurch City Council, and of course very proud of their award last night at the awards, and rightly so. And Sue Kedgley from Wellington Regional Council. So welcome to you all. Roughly 5 minutes for you just to give a view of how you're seeing the opportunities, the challenges that revolve around it, some of the things that we might need to be collectively thinking about and collectively working on. So I'm just going to take you in the straight order that you're appearing on those seats there. You're welcome to come up to the lectern, just keep sitting on the chairs, whatever you feel most comfortable. Liz?
Right, so I'll just, actually, can I get that? I've got some slides, here we go. And I'm not going to get off my seat because I might not be able to get back on time because I'm wearing the wrong skirt. So anyway, you don't need to move away. So in terms of what we're doing for Auckland Transport, and I'll also say to you a little bit about me. So I've worked on EVs and EV policy since around 2005, so I worked in London on this under Ken Livingstone and then under Boris. So for me, none of this is new. And interesting, I was just saying earlier, when I came back from London a couple of years ago and I went to speak to the Ministry of Transport and I talked about electric vehicles and hydrogen as well, and someone said to me, oh, electric vehicles aren't for New Zealand, we're not interested. And then 5 months later the Minister announced his targets, so things have really moved on. In terms of Auckland Transport, we're going to have, and we have, over half of the EVs in New Zealand, and will continue to do so as well. For us, we've been focusing on a number of things, but leadership is really critical in pushing EVs along, from government, from local government, and also champions like Steve West and others as well. It's really important that we have strong leadership through this. For us, we've been focusing on regulation, policy and guidance, infrastructure, communications, just letting people know about electric vehicles and fleet, and not just talking about our light vehicles within our region, but also heavy vehicles. I think that's been a bit forgotten from the conversation, both for us, for our buses, but also freight. I think the freight industry needs to come much more into the discussion. And then the importance of trials and trialling different things, whether it's different types of electric vehicles or whether it's different types of charging infrastructure. And as Steve said, the charging infrastructure is getting faster and faster with a lot more electricity. What does that mean for our grid? And that's quite one of our big important things. So just quickly, some of the challenges for us that we see are really important is alignment, working together. So ECA's been really fantastic in leading the government discussions, showing collaboration, and that's great for us. And so we're working with them. We've got a public-private group. Fit-for-purpose legislation, at the moment we don't have a definition of what a charging point is. Works or installations, that's a really important point for us in Auckland. We'd like clarity on that. Provision of charging infrastructure is critical. We need to work to help the private sector help deliver charging infrastructure. 95% of people would charge at home, but we still need provision for the public as well. And making sure the charging infrastructure talks to each other, because it's all part of one big transport and energy system. So we need to make sure that all the systems can talk to each other and that the operators and people meet a certain standard and it all talks to each other. And then working with ECA and the other councils, we're all one, we like one big world city, New Zealand, so we need to all work together rather than competing. So that would be my 5 cents from Auckland.
Great. Well, look, thank you, Liz. We'll hold questions to the end as we have all day, so if you've got them, throw them into Slido and we'll pick them up at the end of this. Vicki, you look as though you're poised and ready to go.
I'll use this one. Hi, I'm Vicki Buck. I chair the Innovation and Sustainability Committee at the Christchurch City Council, which is a lot of fun. We've kind of had a little inkling of what climate change looks like in a sort of run of earthquakes. So we've seen sinking, liquefaction, flooding, all of those sorts of things. So we're acutely aware of the importance of cities in reducing our carbon footprint on the planet, and just how important it is when you rebuild a city to build in really good, innovative solutions. So apart from electric vehicles, which we're passionate about, we're spending $160 million on cycleways so that people change modes of transport. We've changed the central city, so it's 30k speed limit with an emphasis on pedestrian and cycles and public transport. And one of our aims, as you saw from HMI, this lovely presentation this morning, is to be a test bed for disruptive technologies. And we think electric vehicles are a completely disruptive technology. So we think after a relatively short period of time, there won't be fossil fuel vehicles on the road, and we're really keen to help make that happen. In terms of the charging network, I love the example that Steve and Dee West have set. I think it's been fantastic. I love what the EV users group have done at home, just the evangelistic spirit with which they go out and tell about electric vehicles has been amazing. And our electricity lines company, Orion, have been incredible in putting together the charging network in the city as well. And that's gone in the last 2 years, so it's been very rapid and absolutely fantastic. So from our point of view, we use a lot of vehicles. We think it's really important that there are second-hand electric vehicles available to the community, and one of the ways that we can do that is our own fleet of council vehicles. So we were looking at how we could make and Kevin will have told you all about this, but we were looking at how we could make our fleet fully electric, and then we wanted to include others in that, so other businesses, lawyers, Meridian, all sorts of the District Health Board, Auckand, all sorts of people want to come on board. And then obviously we wanted the public of Christchurch to be able to share those vehicles as well. So last week you will have seen the announcement with Hugo, which has been fantastic. Already we're finding that there are lots of groups of residents saying, hey, we want a hub out here, another one out here, and we want to be using these vehicles for car sharing. And the fact that big fleets have come on board, well, big by Christchurch standards, big fleets have come on board in order to make this happen has been incredible. One of the other companies that we have that's been amazing in this space has been Christchurch Airport, which along with Air New Zealand obviously has electrified the whole scene out there. That rubbish truck that you saw out there is coming to Christchurch in 6 weeks to be the first rubbish truck in Christchurch to collect our rubbish, which everybody's really looking forward to. You will have seen some of the foodstuffs vans out there. We're really keen to to do things quite differently. One of the things we learned from the earthquake is that you don't want to do it the old way again, and one of the things we discovered that came up through the cracks was this amazing sense of innovation and possibility. So we want the city to be known as a city where anything is possible. That's our new byline, anything is possible, and it is. So you'll see more announcements, quite unusual announcements again next week. And some of the things that we've tried are just things like electric bikes, giving people the chance to operate those. We want more electric chargers, we want them everywhere, so we're actually helping people to pay for those. Obviously, because we own the companies of Orion, Red Bus, the airport, all of those sorts of things that People's Republic of Christchurch was known for and still maintains, we can put in the statement of intent what we want them to achieve by way of electrification of their fleet and to do amazing things. And the other thing that we can do is through our procurement policy. So we can make sure that what we buy, and we're a big spender of other people's money, we can actually put environmental objectives very clearly into our procurement policy, and we're just in the process of doing that now. But the last thing I want to leave you with is a very a little known secret. And that is that local government actually can do amazing things. Most people think of local government as really boring, dull and bureaucratic. And that may well be the perception that some people have. But the secret that you don't know and that people in local government don't tell you is that they can actually make amazing things happen. And I think that's what we can all do as part of cities, because cities are going to make the big difference in climate change.
Kia ora, Sue Kedgley. I'm the chair of the Environment Committee in Wellington Regional Council. And I was in July in Europe, and I was really struck there by the seemingly unstoppable momentum towards electric vehicles there. While I was there, Volvo announced it wouldn't be making any more fossil fuel cars after 2019. A Dutch bank predicted that all new cars in Europe would be electric by 2035. France, UK all announced they'll be phasing out diesel and petrol cars just while I was there. It seemed to be all over the media. And I was also struck by the incredible leadership European governments and local government are taking on electric vehicles, with many of them imposing what you might call a pollution tax on petrol and diesel vehicles, exempting EVs from sales taxes, offering free parking, free charging, and a whole lot of other measures, a whole suite of measures that unashamedly favour electric vehicles. And this contrasts quite markedly with our approach, which is essentially leaving it up to the market to provide. So I think we need to acknowledge we're really just at the beginning of our journey here, and that if we do want to speed up our transition to electric vehicles, we need more central and local government leadership to tilt the playing field much more in favour of electric vehicles, and to recognise their huge environmental and public health benefits. So, what is the Regional Council doing? Well, our electric vehicle policy, it's an integral part of our climate change strategy, our commitment to reducing transport emissions, which incidentally constitute the largest emissions in our region at 39%, and it's part of our drive to reduce diesel emissions, improve air quality, and transition to a low-carbon economy. Well, 2 years ago I got a rush of blood to my head, and I introduced a resolution to our council to transition our fleet of cars to an electric fleet. This was unanimously passed by our regional council, and then it was taken up enthusiastically by our chief executive and by staff, some of whom are here, Bruce and Siggy, and they developed our EV first purchasing policy, which it makes a commitment to replace all of our 150 vehicles with electric vehicles unless there's a very good reason why an electric vehicle can't do the job, and there's a few utes that we need to use in regional areas which aren't on the market yet. So far we've got 8 electric vehicles, we've got charging stations around our region, and I would like to see all 78 councils in New Zealand adopt a similar EV first policy of replacing their fleets with electric vehicles, or indeed the innovative leasing policy that Christchurch has come up with. So this becomes the new normal, and it helps to drive up demand for electric vehicles. We've also, like Christchurch, set up a regional electric vehicles working group. Staff around the region all meet. They identify where there are gaps in charging infrastructure. They work together on initiatives such as coordinating with Spark to convert phone boxes into chargers, and it's open to interested parties, the private sector and so far. We've committed to rolling out 100 charging stations around the region, but so far we've only got 8 fast charging and about 16 other charging stations. I wish we had Vector or Orion down in Wellington, but anyway. We've also got the City Councillors working closely with Mevo, which is a car share company, rolling out plug-in hybrids, installing charging stations and so forth around Wellington CBD. Well, it was only 15 months ago that the Wellington Regional and the City Council convened the first highly successful electric vehicle symposium, a bit like this one, and it was called The Future is Electric, and it is absolutely amazing how far the debate has moved just in those 15 months. Our council is also committed to transitioning to an all-electric public transport fleet. This is really important. We'll be purchasing 32 electric double-decker buses and rolling them out from July next year. And again, I'd like to see all councils in New Zealand phasing out polluting diesel buses and transitioning to electric public transport fleets. Obviously, we're involved in the whole trying to install charging stations. We're already struggling to meet up with demand, and we've got 600 EVs in Wellington. And looking at all these other things that councils can do, such as preferential car parking, using our planning rules to encourage or indeed require new apartment buildings to install chargers and supermarkets and such, and just generally promoting the benefits of EV and encouraging their adoption in Wellington. So my take-home messages are that local government should be at the forefront of the EV revolution. For this to happen, we need political leadership. We need mayors and councillors setting the direction. You can't just leave it up to staff, even when you've got brilliant staff such as yourself. The policy, our EV policy, must be an integral part of our overall climate change and public health strategy, because let's face it, EV vehicles are one of our biggest opportunities to reduce our carbon emissions and, of course, diesel emissions. But if we're going to speed up our transition to EVs, we need more central as well as local government policy. We've got to tilt that playing field in favour of electric vehicles and recognise their enormous environmental and public health benefits, which I don't believe are recognised either in the government transport policy statement or any other transport statements or policies at the moment, really, apart from ECA's wonderful fund, etc. And to me, government funding of public transport should, for example, incentivise councils to phase out polluting diesel buses and replace them with clean, non-polluting electric buses, because at the moment we've literally got hundreds of thousands of these diesel buses around New Zealand, all emitting these particulates, these diesel particulates, which the World Health Organization says are class 1 carcinogens. So there's an enormous public health benefit as well as environmental and climate change benefits from switching to EVs. Thank you.
Right, before we get into those Slido questions, I was just sitting there doing a little bit of an audit through my mind, saying, yes, we've done Auckland Transport with our contestable funds, 3 projects, I think it was.
Yes, I didn't actually talk, because
No,
I didn't
you
realise
didn't.
how much about all the things that we're doing, because I thought we were just talking about the challenges.
That's fine. You're all good. I'll
Sorry,
forgive
I
you.
was listening, yeah.
And then with Christchurch, with Hugo, just supported in round 2, and Sue, you're no doubt aware that we supported Transit with one of their rapid
Double
charges
decker.
as well, which again, look, it's not flying our flag, it is just saying that we're targeting the right things. When you hear the comments that we've heard this afternoon, it reinforces for me that contestable fund is actually working. And one of the things that it was set up on the basis of was to make sure that there was an independent panel that assessed the applications, because as Liz said earlier, the subscriptions were massively oversubscribed in each round, and therefore you need to go through a vigorous process to make sure the most deserving and the projects that will make the biggest difference are actually the ones getting approved, irrespective of who they are and irrespective of the amounts involved as well, albeit they're capped out at $500,000. And I feel very confident that we've done that with the 3 organisations represented on the stage today. But anyway, enough of me. Let's get into those questions. Liz, Auckland Transport, which piece of legislation or pieces are not fit for purpose?
I would say the energy, I apologise, Ika, but it's not your part, and some of the energy legislation, just in terms of where does the definition of a charging infrastructure fit. Even, for example, from the GPS, so the policy statement for transport, there is some discussion about electric vehicles, but no actual clear direction. So it's just, I guess, there's a lot of the Minister of Transport's got strong, targets, but actually, if he puts it into the legislation with how, for example, NZTA drives how we're funded and getting our transport funded, it would be more helpful to get more ring fence for electric and to encourage it. And that goes back to the public transport operating model, so the P-TON contracts. So for us, we've just finished our clean bus, low emission bus roadmap for how quickly we can go to electric with our buses. and at the moment the price of a bus is about double. So it's of an electric bus, because also no electric bus complies in the vehicle dimension and mass rules. So there's with the weight. So that is another piece of legislation fit for purpose. I'm happy to see whoever it is outside and go through my list, but I could be here all day.
And add the government policy statement also, which sets the whole direction of transport needs
which
also.
is what it's meaning, yeah.
I could hear Brent Lewis pad and pencil scribbling away frantically, Liz, and that he's booking a time with you straight after.
Yes, he knows.
Yeah. But look, great answer, because that's just the reality of how you're seeing it from a major infrastructure provider and what some of the issues are. Sue, one for you. What sorts of central government policies do you have in mind for accelerating the uptake of EVs?
I particularly had in mind what they do in many European countries, which is that they have a what they call you might call a pollution tax for diesel and petrol cars and vehicles, and they exempt the exempt electric vehicles from that tax. So in Norway, the bigger your car, the more sales tax you pay. That sort of thing. But also, I'm thinking of when it comes to trying to switch our public transport. That's where we need what we were talking about, the so-called PTOM contract, giving incentives for local government to switch to electric and away from diesel buses.
One last thing to add is all the movement towards road pricing as well. We talk about reducing congestion, but it will have a huge impact on emissions as well, and also the uptake of electric vehicles, which has been seen in London and a lot of other cities, and that could help in emissions-based parking charges, which could be also enabled through national legislation.
Actually, they're looking at Europe, looking at the sort of range of incentives, financial and otherwise, that they have in place there, and applying some of these on a consistent basis back here.
Vicki, one for you. Christchurch City Council happy to share their findings and learnings with other local authorities.
Yep.
Best part.
Yeah, absolutely, provided that's okay with you, Go. We think actually that the way in which we will take most initiatives in terms of climate change is actually by the cities taking leadership. So we'd really like some sort of, city climate change exchange group that meets all the time, just getting everything sorted. It's not just electric vehicles, it's not just the bus system, it's actually a whole pile of things, and I don't know why we all have to reinvent it. So we've got an Innovation and Sustainability Fund starting at the end of this month that will throw up a whole lot of new initiatives, because you just don't know what's coming around the corner, so to speak, and there will be a whole lot of learnings, and we'd love to learn from other people as well. We're really keen to do that.
And if I could just mention, our EV policy, cash policy is up on the website. It's available for other councils. Whangarei and a few others have already adopted it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. So this business of sharing, councils sharing their expertise is a great idea.
And just one thing about networks, following on from what Vicki said, is that we're a member of C40, so it was 40 cities acting on climate change. There's now 92, and the COP21 conference in Paris talked about everyone's given up on governments. It's the cities that need to also take action, and we have access to networks and working groups and huge knowledge, and the more that we can link in and together, the better, really, and share that knowledge and be fast followers or leaders rather than failing from the same mistakes as others. And that includes the resilience of the grid and the impact of EVs.
Could I just be slightly provocative and ask you, do you think that local government and the leadership of local government has got that in their sights about coordinating the really good things that are being done at the EV level and just dispersing the benefits? There's a huge range in resourcing and capability, as we all know, and the small ones frequently need help. Is it being coordinated?
I don't think so.
I could, from a transport officers, I have a regular call with Christchurch and Wellington City Council monthly on some of this, but we also are members of what they call the transport it's the Transport SIG, I've forgotten what it's called, but it's the Transport Regional Officers Group, and we do share information, but there is something about what we could do with ECA about getting that training out and getting people to understand.
Well, it's the political leadership, you know,
Yeah.
that's what I feel. I feel councillors, mayors and local government New Zealand, you know, we need to be, local government New Zealand should be helping to coordinate a group at the political as well as officer level, because the officers can only go so far if they don't have that political support and leadership.
And I think if they don't, within the next few months, we just have to do it anyway.
All right, there's another one for you. Do Auckland Transport see themselves as an important player in the charging network?
We see ourselves as an enabler. We won't be, so we've got money from ECA to install 60 charging points on our off-street car parks. We want to enable and encourage other people to put it in, but we won't be putting a whole lot of infrastructure in, I guess, on taxpayers' money. It's more about working in partnership, so come and talk to us. But one of the big things is through consenting and requiring developers to provide 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 charging points when they're putting new car parks in, and that's, or future-proofing for it, that's quite important. So we see ourselves more as an enabler rather than leading the way in terms of charging infrastructure.
Vicki, what do you see as the greatest threat to electric mobility in urban areas?
No, I don't see a threat. Certainly at home, with Orion's emphasis on resilience post-earthquake, the network that provides the means by which the fuel gets there, is stunning. So I don't see any real threat. I just see opportunities in it. We've made it possible for Orion to put their charging stations on council land, make it really easy for electric vehicles. The difficulties I see are the capital cost in terms of people taking up electric vehicles. Just like any renewable technology, it's always capital, and then you get that back in operational savings. And I mean, from our point of view, in terms of the bus system, unfortunately in Christchurch it's controlled by an organisation called ECAN, and their model of which runs from Waitaki to Kaikoura and which runs the Christchurch public transport system. Don't ask me why, because I can't explain that, but we really don't have something that says electric vehicles within 4 years, and so don't even think about renewing any fossil fuel powered buses, which is what we should be at for our bus system. And it's crazy that we haven't seen that leadership. We're trying every which way of getting that back out of them or working with them or whatever, but I don't know why they have that function. So that's a barrier at the moment in terms of our bus system, which we'd love to make completely electric.
Liz, I'm going to fire another one at you. You're a popular person this afternoon. Looking into that crystal ball, if you had a regional fuel levy, would some of that, in your view, be aimed towards supporting EV development?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are being looked at the moment in terms of fuel levies, and with us looking at road pricing, this is exactly some of the things they're looking at the moment. And the Mayor it's quite interesting. The Mayor is very supportive of EVs. He's got his own EV, and there are definitely discussions going on about that at the moment. And as we've seen from around the world, putting different fuel levies or different types of road pricing in, it can make a huge difference.
Great.
But just sorry to add one last thing is back onto the procurement of Petong. It would be good potentially for all of us to do joint procurement across the country on buses potentially as a way to overcome some of these barriers.
We'd love to if we controlled it.
Yeah.
Right. Sue, I'm going to throw that question there. What do you see as the greatest threat to electric mobility in urban areas? I'm going to throw that same question to you. Any comments on that?
A threat? Well, I did find that fascinating, today's discussion with Vector about, the grid and how we do, the threats to it being overused if we got a huge uptake of electric vehicles. So I think there are, from that point of view of the grid, there are issues. But I really just see it as, like you do, as a possibility of opportunities of getting away from these old-fashioned diesel and petrol cars. As someone said, it does seem bizarre that we're sort of importing this petrol from the other side of the world, bringing it in and fueling our vehicles when we've got abundant electricity right here in New Zealand. So I just see it really as possibilities and opportunities, not threats.
Plus, I think there's a lovely thing of not having to buy petrol and oil. There's just something that is so satisfying about being able to sort of give the fingers to the oil companies.
I couldn't possibly comment. Right. Dave's asked an interesting question and it's getting a few likes, so let's fire away. Why is there so much difference between councils on the consenting process around the installation of electric vehicle chargers? Who wants to have a crack at that? All Liz, you're itching to.
I just a minor crack, and then the others can have a crack. So some of it comes back down to the point I made earlier, which is about that definition of the definition of what a charging point is in terms of as it works or as an installation. So there's been different councils defining it differently and the way that they treat it. Also, in terms of, I guess, our regional authorities, we also have different planning regimes. So the way that we value space and also the way that we put charges in. In Auckland, our policy is not to put charging on street if possible, because we've got a lot of off-street space. And we've got a lot of demand, multiple demands for our on-street parking. But it's all about looking at the right place and a site specific. We talk with Wellington and Christchurch quite regularly about this challenge, but it would be good to get some more consistency on it. Yeah.
Vicki?
Maybe a bit of national direction.
No. So ours is really easy. You can put them basically. So Kevin's done all the work on making sure that you can put them pretty much wherever you want them. And so we've
How do you get around the consenting issue?
So we control the footpath, the road, so there's not a separate Auckland Transport equivalent. It's called the Christchurch City Council. So we've tried to make it as simple as possible, and currently we've got money available to help people put in even more charging stations outside hotels, supermarkets, all those sort of things.
So my understanding, you give something like $3,000 as an incentive, so if someone wants to install a charging station, outside their apartment or whatever. Seems a terrific idea.
As of about 3 weeks ago, and it's not retrospective.
Kevin's sitting there nodding.
Alrighty, just conscious of time, so this is going to be the last one, but the whole issue of funding your bus transport network is obviously quite a lot of discussion in the session, and a specific question there around what needs to change in the model to favour EV buses. And I'm sure you could all have a go at this. So Liz, starting with you.
We would just, it would be like Wellington's light vehicle procurement policy. You'd just say that it should be EV first in terms of the buses. The challenge for us is also operators own they own the depot as well as the buses, and so there's it is a lot more cost. But if we put it in there, then that's got to be part of their decision of whether they bid for our services. And we've got 1,300, soon to probably be 1,500 buses. So it's a big cost, but it's something we've got to do.
It's changing.
We've got to have courage.
Whole what they call the PTOM. I hate acronyms, but it's the public transport. What is it?
Operating model.
The public transport operating model, and it's also making explicit, which I don't think we do at the moment, the environmental, public health, and climate change benefits of transitioning to electric vehicles, and actually putting them in therefore as incentives through this PTOM contract model.
So you've just done that with your latest procurement for the major bus contracts recently led, haven't you?
Not completely. We have given a weighting in favour of low emission buses, but not. We haven't gone further to say that they must be electric.
And that's the same with us.
Right.
I think it's really quite simple. All that needs to happen is ECAN, or they could give control of the buses to us. We'd be very happy with that. Just needs to say that as from 4 years, 5 years, whatever they want to do, there will not be a fossil fuel bus on the road. and the operators will adapt to that if they want the contracts. And we need some trials. Sorry, I do need to acknowledge
Private subsidy going on there.
I do need to acknowledge Eka's help and some of the other initiatives. They've been absolutely fantastic. But just in terms of buses, they are so key in terms of changing the whole concept of what some people regard them as the sort of loser cruiser into something that is actually really cool to ride on.
Actually, I must just add, we mustn't just talk about buses, we must talk about light rail, because one of the reasons cities around the world are switching to light rail is because diesel buses, even when you get the best low emission diesel buses, which is Euro 5 and 6, they're still emitting carbon emissions and diesel particulates, but they constantly need to change their filters, so they're very expensive to run. And so people are just saying, look, we really do, for all these reasons, have to switch to electric transport, and many are bypassing buses and going to electric.
But there are alternatives that aren't rail, and that we will show next week. That are even far more.
Like electric autonomous
autonomous electric.
And then there's electric ferries too, which we can't forget.
Right.
And electric trains.
Yeah.
Okay, with all that list of wonderful ideas there of what can be electrified next, could you please join me in thanking the three panellists?